What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 15 top 20 quarterback rankings. Yesterday, I went through the running backs, wide receivers, and defenses. Today, it is quarterbacks and tight ends. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But let's just dive right into tier one here. And starting off with my quarterback one, I have Josh Allen going up against the Lions. He is coming off, one of the craziest games we've seen in NFL history. 51.9 fantasy points, and that's in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues, 6 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 3 on the ground. And it's not like this has just been like one huge game and he's been, average in previous weeks. That's 3 straight games of 24 plus points. So he's balling out. On paper, maybe not an ideal matchup, but Josh Allen's going to be a great play, regardless of the defense he's going up against. Then my quarterback 2 is going to be Lamar Jackson going up against the Giants. The Ravens have the highest implied point total this week. On the season, Lamar is the quarterback 1 in points per game. He's been super consistent, 22 plus points in 6 out of his last 7. My only concern with Lamar is just how big of favorites the Ravens are, 14.5-point favorites at this point. So my concern is that maybe they go ahead early and this just turns into like a Derrick Henry, racking up a ton of rushing volume, kind of pivot away from the passing attack. But it's Lamar Jackson. They're going to put up points. I still think he is a great play this week. It's just why I have him, not in the number 1 spot, despite him being the quarterback 1. Then my quarterback 3 is going to be Joe Burrow, also in tier 1. Another dude who's just been on an absolute tear. In his last 5 games, he is averaging 27.1 points per game. In his last 4, he has thrown for at least 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in all 4 of them. So Joe Burrow playing at a super, super high level. We know this defense is going to give up points. Joe Burrow is going to need to produce for them to win games. Now, looking at tier 2, we're going to start off with Jaden Daniels going up against the Saints. Coming off a bye week here, and he's had an interesting kind of arc to this season. Started off really hot, looked really good out of the gates. Then towards the middle of the season, started to slow down a little bit, got a little bit banged up, but he's been, really hot up until the bye week. Week 12, 30.4 points. Week 13, 27.6. Fine matchup here against the Saints. The Commanders have the 7th highest implied point total, like Jaden Daniels here as my quarterback 4. And then my other tier 2 quarterback is Jalen Hurts going up against the Steelers. On paper, just not a good matchup. The Steelers are allowing the fewest points per game to the quarterback position, but Jalen Hurts is the quarterback 4. He's been a consistent option, even in a not great matchup. Still a really nice top 5 option, in my opinion. Now, looking at tier 3, going to start off this tier with Tua going up against the Texans. He has been balling out over the last 4 weeks. 25.2 points per game over that stretch. He is averaging 325 passing yards a game and has thrown for 11 total touchdowns. I've talked about this, I feel like, week after week, but he's not someone who has a super high floor just because the rushing production is non-existent, but he just continues to go out there. He's slinging it. The weapons are coming through. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane out of the backfield, Jonnu Smith, having a breakout season here. So Tua, like him here as my quarterback 6. Then I'm going to go with Brock Purdy going up against the Rams. He's put up 18 plus points in 4 out of 5 games. He had that one just awful performance against the Bills. I was concerned about his shoulder. Like, was this something that was going to be lingering rest of season? It's kind of just looking like that was a one-off awful game. He's been pretty good, without that one performance. It's a nice matchup here. The Rams are allowing the 8th most points per game to the quarterback position. So I think Brock Purdy is a nice mid-tier QB1. And then my last guy in this tier is going to be Bo Nix going up against the Colts. Kind of had a little bit of a shaky start to the season, but since week 5, he is averaging over 20 points per game. Also a plus matchup here against the Colts, who are allowing the 11th most points per game to the quarterback spot. Now moving into a very, very large tier 4, kind of tough to break down this tier. We're going to go with Sam Darnold going up against the Bears, and this might seem low for Darnold because he's coming off by far his best game of the season, 24.6 points. In week 14, you had Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison completely balling out, and he's been pretty consistent, 19 plus in each of his last 4 games. The problem here is just the matchup. The Bears have actually been pretty tough against opposing quarterbacks. They are allowing the 3rd fewest points per game, so I don't want to be completely swayed by that one huge performance. On paper, not a great matchup, but still a top 10 option for me. someone who I'd still be confident with in my fantasy lineup. Then after Darnold, going to go with Justin Herbert going up against the Buccaneers, someone who pretty much has like the complete inverse matchup. The Buccaneers are allowing the most points per game to the quarterback spot. Now, I will say this is going to be assuming that Ladd McConkey plays. If Ladd McConkey's not out there, even in a favorable matchup, this is not like an anti-Herbert thing. I think he's a top 5 real-life quarterback. He just does not have the weapons around him, to produce. So assuming Ladd is out there, I think Justin Herbert is a top 10 play. In that same matchup, I have Baker Mayfield going up against the Chargers. It's not a good matchup. The Chargers are bottom 10 in points per game allowed to the quarterback position, and he had a really great start to the season, kind of through midseason. Last few weeks haven't been great, 16 points per game with Mike Evans back in the lineup, kind of coming down to earth a little bit, and with the tough matchup, I think back-end QB1 is fair. Then I have Kyler Murray going up against the Patriots. On the season, he's the quarterback 12 in points per game, so he's been fine, but he was someone I was really high on heading into the season. Like the rushing upside, Marv coming in, I was big on Trey McBride. McBride's been awesome. It's like the Marv connection just isn't there, so he's been underwhelming, but he is the quarterback 12 in points per game in like a pretty neutral matchup here. I think he's fine. Then I have Jordan Love going up against the Seahawks. Someone who had a pretty nice start to the season, now kind of settling in as the quarterback 14 in points per game. The biggest difference has just been the touchdowns. In his first 5 games, he was averaging 3 touchdowns per game. In the last 6, he is down to 1.2, and it obviously coincides with Josh Jacobs, who is not getting into the end zone early in the season, and then now has just gone on a touchdown rampage. So that's kind of hurting Jordan Love. Probably something we expect to balance out in the last, 3-4 weeks of the season here. Also in Tier 4, Patrick Mahomes going up against the Browns. It's an average matchup, and he's kind of just been like an average fantasy quarterback. He's the quarterback 15 in points per game. He's QB 15 in a neutral matchup. Quarterback 14 seems pretty fair for him. Then I have Jared Goff going up against the Bills. Bills are actually allowing the 4th fewest points per game to the quarterback position. The Lions are still going to put up points, though. 2nd in implied points, but this is just a much better matchup for the running backs. So Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, as opposed to Jared Goff at the quarterback position. Couple more guys in this tier. We have Matthew Stafford going up against the 49ers with his healthy wide receivers. Ever since Puka and Cooper Kupp are back in the lineup, he's averaging 19.4 points per game. Not the best matchup here against the 49ers, but nothing crazy. And then the last guy in this tier, got to put some respect on Jameis Winston's name, especially as a fantasy option going up against the Chiefs. If you wanted to make the argument that he should be higher, I wouldn't push back super hard. It does feel a little bit sketchy starting him, but the dude's averaging 20.4 points per game as the starter. And what's even crazier is his passing volume has been insane. 43 pass attempts per game in his starts. Probably going to be a trailing game script here. Probably going to rack up a ton of volume stats like he has done week after week. Then my tier 5, we're going from a massive tier 4 to a one-man tier 5 here. I have Anthony Richardson going up against the Broncos. He's kind of a tough player to rank because since he's come back in as the starter, he's been a really nice option. He's put up 28.1, 13, and 21.2 points. It's not a good matchup here against the Broncos. They are bottom 7 in points per game allowed. And I just don't know if that 3-game sample size is what we're going to be getting rest of season because he's had some pretty low floor games early on in the year. So in a not great matchup, we'll kind of see if he goes out and plays super well against the Broncos. Could definitely see me really scooching him up the rankings moving forward. And then tier 6, kind of underwhelming here, but man, CJ Stroud against the Dolphins. It's not a good matchup. They are bottom 2 in points per game allowed to quarterbacks, and Stroud has just not been good enough for fantasy. He has not hit 16 fantasy points in any of his last 7 games, so just not a great situation. And then Russell Wilson going up against the Eagles. It's not a good matchup, bottom 5 in points per game allowed, but as the starter, he's averaging 17.1 points per game. So he is producing, since he's come over or taken over as the starter. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 20 quarterbacks. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Any questions, drop them down below. Stay tuned for the tight ends coming out later today. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.